Welcome to Mythmakers. Mythmakers is the podcast for fantasy fans and fantasy creatives, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. My name is Julia Golding, and I'd like to invite you to enjoy the second part of my conversation with Professor Nick Groom. So let's talk about the Bakshi film, which I've only seen once, and I saw it once when I was young, like at the time it came out.
Yes.
Obviously, it has a limitation in that it finishes at the Battle of Helm's Deep. They ran out of money. But what did you think was the strength of that adaptation and possibly its weakness, if you see that as well?
Yeah, well, I had exactly the same experience of you as I saw it when it came out. I went with my school friends. I was bitterly disappointed. I was angry about it.
Yeah.
I don't mind admitting it. And I didn't rewatch it for many years. In fact, it was only when I began to teach the Lord of the Rings that I thought that it was the responsible thing to do to watch it again. In the meantime, one of my friends from school with whom I'd originally seen it was raving about it and saying, "Oh, it's way better than the Peter Jackson movies." Now, you're quite right. This time it does sort of finish in the middle. It didn't do too badly at the box office, but the backers didn't want to continue it. Again, we've got a radical filmmaker, another bad boy, if you like, of the film industry. Ralph Bakshi was famous for Fritz the Cat, which is this sort of obscene cartoon about the sort of hippie lifestyle. So why choose somebody like that? Because they wanted to do something different. They didn't want to have a run-of-the-mill Hollywood movie. They wanted this to stand out. And they also wanted to carry the audience with them, I think, from the 60s. The people who had read Lord of the Rings while they were maybe students, and show them that they could then, go to the cinema and enjoy a reworked version of it. It doesn't all work. Some of it's terrible, but the mix between animation and live action is experimental. And in that, I think it does reflect Tolkien's own attempts to experiment with different literary styles. So the technique is called rotoscoping. So you actually film live action with real actors, and then you superimpose onto that animated characters. And he also degraded the film quite a lot by scratching it and adding different colors and so forth. And a lot of it's quite disorientating, full of flashing lights and rather hallucinatory scenes. I think at its best, it's flawed. It's certainly flawed, but I think it's got some interesting qualities. The most effective thing about it is its pace. Again, like the Boorman film, you actually knew that you actually had to make people stay in the cinema. You had to tell the story so it goes bang, bang, bang. And he got that absolutely right, I think. So he got it so right that Peter Jackson uses a lot of his changes to the structure directly in The Fellowship of the Ring. So, for example, the hobbits are leaving the Shire at the same time that Gandalf is going to visit Saruman. That's pretty much scene for scene in the Bakshi films and the Peter Jackson films. It's not like that in the book at all. We don't know what's happened to Gandalf. We don't find out until they get to Rivendell, where he's been. But there are also, I'm not the first person to point this out by any means, but some of the most iconic scenes in Peter Jackson's film, such as the hobbits on the road when the Black Rider comes, they hide under the roots of the tree, for example, that is taken directly from Bakshi. Bakshi realized it was no good just having the Black Riders in the background and a few mysterious sounds. He wanted to have this very threatening and unnerving almost confrontation between the hobbits and the Black Rider, and to show that this was something very eerie and unfamiliar and dangerous, trespassing on the Shire, and really get that sense of threat across much, much earlier than you necessarily get in the book. So in that respect, I think it has qualities. To put it another way, the Peter Jackson films would not be the same without the Bakshi film.
I think in the sort of background material for those DVD sets, Peter Jackson says one particular shot he did on purpose to honor Bakshi, which is right at the beginning with the party where they're calling out the names of the hobbits.
Hmm.
And he says Proudfoot, and somebody shouts Proud Feet. And there's
Yes.
a image of a man, hobbits, foot sort of front with a sort of quite an unusual camera angle, which apparently is from the cartoon. I don't remember that one, but I think you could
Yes, it
probably
is.
put
But
those
I
side by
think
side.
I think Peter Jackson is being a little disingenuous because I mean clearly the scene underneath the roots of the tree is
That
taken
too.
taken straight from it. But I think if you can watch them side by side, and you can see how consciously or unconsciously, Peter Jackson is alluding to the Bakshi film. Any sensible filmmaker is going to watch the earlier adaptations, like any theatre director. Research his earlier productions of a play to see how people have solved certain problems. I'll
So
tell you one other thing is that we talked about the BBC radio version. That also is directly inspired by the Ralph Bakshi version because they take the same actors.
right,
So, they were keen to certainly the actor who plays Gollum, whose name,
Peter. Um,
yeah, I'll have to look it up. I should have checked beforehand.
yeah.
But I mean, he's one of the actors who. I mean, it's a great cast for the BBC version. You've got Bill Nighy in there, for example.
William
He
Nye. Yeah, it took me a long while to put him together with the Bill Nye that we all
we
know.
know today, yes. But
Um,
no, they certainly did carry through some of the same actors. So there is a clear connection going from Bakshi to the BBC version and then on to the Peter Jackson versions.
Peter Woodthorpe.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
to God
much.
to Google for providing me with that answer. Um, so Peter Jackson, obviously, everybody listening to this, I would think almost everybody will have watched it at some point. Um, Huge achievement,
It's amazing. It's an amazing
huge,
achievement.
huge achievement, um, and I think it's reset a lot of people's mental furniture for what Middle Earth looks like, for better or for worse.
Well, I think the work that people like Alan Lee and John Howe did is phenomenal
Yeah.
in terms of the visualization and the detail, particularly in the Lord of the Rings films, the actual tangible, material, physical quality is breathtaking.
So when I criticize it, I usually think I'm criticizing something which it's like improving upon something good. So there'll be various choices I would have done differently but that's totally with the I don't underestimate the enormity of the task that they had. But there is a sort of connection between Boorman, Bakshi, and Peter Jackson in there were both all three of them are kind of slightly odd directors to choose.
Yeah, yeah,
Because Peter Jackson came from his sort of comedy horror
yeah.
films
Sure,
beforehand.
sure.
So what would you say were the well, I mean, there's so much to say, but should we just pick a couple of things which you think are the areas which really worked in terms of giving us a 21st century version of Tolkien? These were, if people remember, these came out right at the beginning of the century,
Yeah, yeah,
and they
yeah.
sort of set Tolkien up for this century. And what do you think is the room for improvement, the place you'd like to see reimagined or revisited if someone else takes on this task?
It's interesting. I'm going to be controversial and say that the one of the things that Peter Jackson does very well, he makes changes that you don't notice. So for those readers who might only have a passing familiarity with the book, they might have read it when they were younger, that they won't notice, for example, that the film begins, as it quite rightly should, I think, if you're making a film. It doesn't begin with a long expected party. It begins with the forging of the rings and then the Battle of the Last Alliance. And that's exactly how Bakshi begins his film as well. So straight away, it gets you into an area of the plot that gives the viewer some ground on which they can stand. Otherwise, it would be rather, I think, impenetrable just to begin in Hobbiton with a party of somebody we'd never heard of before, and so forth. But more than that, the words that Galadriel speaks right at the beginning about the world is changing, she never says those words. They're said by Treebeard at the end of the book. But Peter Jackson, Philippa Bowen's Fran Walsh, his co-writers, were very good at recognizing that you could use Tolkien's words in different contexts. And that's one of the great pleasures, I think, of going back to the book after becoming familiar with the films, that you see the characters in a different light. When Grima Wormtongue has that deeply unsettling attack on Eowyn, and he, says that, what have you been thinking during the night? I
The
can't
bitter
remember the
watches of the night.
Bitter Watches of the Night. Thank you. Yes, I should have. I should have marked up on this. It's Gandalf who says that in sympathy in the book. It's not Grima Wormtongue who's saying it as a way of, this sort of predatory way. So we realise that the language is in fact multifaceted, that these lines, these words can be understood in different ways. I think that Peter Jackson's very effective at doing that. There are lots of big changes that, again, you just don't notice unless you're following the films with the book. I think the thing that I was most disappointed by was there was no scouring of the Shire, which I think is a crucial scene because it adds that bitterness to the triumph. And I remember when I saw the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo looks into the mirror of Galadriel. We've already discussed that, and he sees what looks like the scouring of the Shire. I thought, great, they're going to include that. That's very courageous, but of course they don't. On the other hand, Peter Jackson did step back from some of his more sort of radical changes, and you can some of the scenes that he started shooting but then deleted included Aragorn having a duel with Sauron, for example, which I think would have been a mistake. Sort of Sauron has to remain remote after he's defeated when he first loses the ring. So I think all in all, it's a huge success. But I would have liked to have seen, the Scouring of the Shire, because you end up with this very long farewell. And I know the book has several endings, but the film has just got this very long sequence of everybody saying goodbye and getting weepy. And that's also because, us as viewers are saying goodbye. We've been, when we first saw it, we spent 3 years watching these movies. So it's partly reflecting the experience of the viewer in quite an interesting way, I think. But I'd have liked to have had a little bit of this sort of bitterness at the end, to go with that sort of sweetness that Jackson wants to end with.
Yes, I think perhaps that's why the next adaptation should be something like a TV series, because they'd have the canvas to do that, and you could have
Yeah.
its own couple of episodes even if you're doing a multi-season thing. It would
Yes, you
be
could do.
interesting to see. For me, the key thing, I think the casting is very good,
It's
but I
excellent.
I don't like the choice of having Elijah Wood as Frodo, and not because there's anything wrong with Elijah Wood. It's just by choosing someone who's beautiful and very young wrenches the character of Frodo, who is mature and has his own heroism and thoughts, and he's just more interesting in the book than he is in the film. And it does look odd, all these grown-ups sending this basically child soldier off to
Mm.
Mordor. Um, that's not how it feels when you're reading Frodo in the book. So I would have preferred or would like to see. I mean, it's fine, leave that adaptation. It's done, it's great, it's got lots going for it. But I would like to see a future adaptation which treats Frodo more like the sort of Martin Freeman age of actor,
That's interesting. That's
with
very
a
good.
sort of
Yeah.
interesting, less of the ingenue abroad feel to him, but someone who is part of, it would make his sort of collapse even more interesting because that's how
Mm.
he sort of mentally collapses later. So
Yes,
that's what I
yes.
would like to see different.
That's
I
very
can see
interesting.
why they did it because there's all sorts of, you don't want someone who conflicts with Aragorn being, you want to change, you know. I can see why they chose that, but for me, I would much prefer to see Frodo as Frodo from the book. Okay, there's so much to say here. We haven't even touched on The Hobbit. So, um, Nick, have at The Hobbit, and tell me, similar to what we've just said about Lord of the Rings, what you felt was right, what was wrong.
Yeah, the Hobbit's a very different beast to the Lord of the Rings films. And Peter Jackson and his co-writers, I think, are being deliberately playful. I mean, obviously, it's an extravagance to make a three-movie series out of a short children's book, and they have to invent a lot as well, and they play so much. Not this time with the material props, which is such a strength of the Lord of the Rings, but there's so much that's computer-generated imagery. And so you get these stupendous scenes of the of Smaug's hoard, which is just tons and tons and tons of gold, which would sort of wreck a global economy if it was ever let out of the mountain. But I think that he's really wanting to show you things that you can't really imagine. He'd done that once before in The Lord of the Rings, and in fact, I was in two minds whether to go and see it when I heard about it until I saw a South Bank show when they had some of the scenes from Isengard. And I just thought, this is amazing. This is the visualization here is incredibly impressive. And so, of course, I went to see it and was pleased that I did. I think Peter Jackson is trying to do something similar, but at the next level in The Hobbit. Everything is sort of far bigger. There are thousands more in the armies. The whole thing is protracted. It's a much sort of longer experience. And I think that's fine. I don't see a problem with that. That the movie's grossed almost as much as the Lord of the Rings ones did. So in financial terms, they're a success. Have they aged as well? Probably not. But I think they have enough sort of interest. And again, you can't really legislate and say to people, well, you can't read the book until and you can't watch the movies until you've read the book, for example. So all of these adaptations are becoming part of an ever-growing Tolkien world, and viewers and readers will enter it at different points, I think. And because of the ubiquity, particularly of the Peter Jackson films, you really have to accept that they are part of this Tolkien multiverse now. And I mean, I'm trying to look for the positive aspects rather than the negative ones because people do love them. I mean, my children, for example, really enjoy the Hobbit films. They've both read The Hobbit several times, but they like the imaginative playfulness. They also like the fact that there's a very strong female character.
Yeah.
I think that sort of the introduction of Toriel is essential for a 21st century audience. But they did make the interesting decision to keep all of the dwarves as well and try to give them different characters. Some of them in the book aren't nearly so well developed. And they also do keep the darkness of characters getting slain at the end, which is of course what C.S. Lewis said about it. It begins like a children's story and ends like a Norse saga.
Yeah.
And that combination of different styles, of different moods and tones, I think is something that Peter Jackson sort of succeeds in conveying. One of the things that I suggest in my book, the way that Tolkien wrote was very unplanned. It was very exploratory, and he was trying all sorts of different things, and he was adapting material himself. And I think you get an element of that in the Peter Jackson films. There's a sense that we're exploring, we're going through this world or this adventure with the characters rather than looking down at them. It's what Terry Pratchett said about Lord of the Rings. He said you felt that you were, living the book when you were reading it. And part of the reason for that is that sort of Tolkien didn't know where he was going with the book. There's a lovely letter when somebody asks him, has obviously asked him how is the book going, and he says, "Well, we're still in the Shire, but these black riders have turned up, and I've got no idea where they've come from." So he had a map, but he didn't have a plan, and so you get these radical changes of direction. Treebeard was originally going to be an evil character. Now you can see an element of that in Old Man Willow,
Mm.
I think, and in the Huorns. But he's constantly changing his mind and adapting, and sort of shifting his perspective. And I think that quality of the book is something that you do get in the Peter Jackson films, where he's filming, way more scenes than he has to, with different inflections, and then he's putting them together in different ways. They are in different ways because the theatre release is not only shorter, obviously, than the DVD release, but he actually uses different takes of certain scenes to give a different character to the DVD release than he might see on the cinema release. And so it's not simply adding scenes, it's actually using different versions of the same scenes.
I've always felt that a couple of things that are problematic for me is he was using the revolutionary frame rate thing, which to my eye
Yeah.
doesn't quite look right. Because I've got a problem. My brain's got a problem with it. It feels, particularly in the Goblin Caves, I can't. My eyes don't read it as real. Um, that's my problem. Maybe a modern generation brought up on video games would find that just fine, and your kids are very fine. But I also feel there were some really good changes. So I thought developing the politics of Lake Town
Yeah,
so that
definitely.
Bard has a purpose, a history, that was a good change. But I felt the pacing was very wrong, and that you could probably take the material of the three films and make two really good films out of it, particularly the vastly overindulgent last battle.
Yeah, the last battle is never ending.
Yeah, and
Um, but he couldn't let it go. And he also wanted to give it the sense of a battle. He was using a handheld camera. He was doing a lot of the techniques that sort of CNN war reporters use to try to
oh,
get that immediacy. But if it had been two movies, we'd all be saying, well, why isn't it three? Everybody
I
wants to have
wouldn't. Definitely not. No.
everyone wants to have
No.
another movie of Lord of the Rings. And I think that because that's, there's hours and hours of footage from the Battle of Helm's Deep. And I think that maybe with the Battle of the Five Armies, he was thinking, well, we've done one, yeah, extraordinary fantasy battle scene. Let's
You got
try
to
to top
top it. Yeah.
that. Yes.
Okay, right. So, Nick, if you've still got time, I'd like to
Yeah,
ask
sure.
you about Rings of Power because you've updated your book to include it because originally when it first came out it was in advance of Rings of Power. And now you've got a new chapter looking at presumably just
Hmm.
the first season rather than the second. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the book, when it was first published, came out on the day that the Rings of Power was first
Jolly
broadcast.
good.
Which made there was some comment online somebody said, well, why didn't they include Rings of Power? I said, well, because it was published on the same day. But I thought that I owed it to um, you know Tolkien readers and watchers of the movies, to say something swiftly about the Rings of Power. Incidentally, that extra chapter is available from the Tolkien Society, so I didn't want people to have to buy the book twice. So if you're a member of the Tolkien Society, you can get access to that material. But again, I wanted to see how Rings of Power followed on from the Peter Jackson films, because there are sort of clear references, and there are John Howe is being used again for the visual material. There was sort of Howard Shore's theme music was used in part for it, and it seemed to be a return to that, to the material culture of the Lord of the Rings, using less CGI. and using more of the real sort of weapons and armor and sort of building places like the portent in Numenor, for example. And lots of like little details which I find fascinating, such as I think I mentioned the fact that they had fish frying on the set of Numenor. So the actors would just be sort of have this sort of atmosphere of being at the coast. Of course, you can't tell that when you're watching it. But I think that ambition is something which should be applauded really in trying to develop that sense of realism. I really enjoyed the Rings of Power. I think it was. I'm not going to give anything away to people who've not seen it, but I think that the arc of season one was very, very effective and very unexpected. And I know that again, there's going to be a lot of material made up and added, but I think that it's actually knitting together in quite a nice way. I like the way that they're combining the plot lines that they do have. There's also some fantastic acting. The casting is good, and again, there are strong female characters, but they're flawed. Galadriel is sort of like this sort of brilliant, sort of psychotic warrior, but she's also got this, towering sense of, her own sort of self-importance and independence. And I think that to have these characters who are admirable and strong, but also tragically flawed, it works very, very well. I also enjoyed it because it has a humanity to it again, and I've used that word before. I didn't like Game of Thrones. I found Game of Thrones to be well, immoral or amoral, really, I should be saying, brutal, unnecessarily violent. The Rings of Power doesn't have that.
Mm.
It's got a very different mood, a very different atmosphere, and to me, it's about the importance of collaboration, cooperation, communication, and I think it develops those themes in very positive ways.
Yeah, I don't agree with you about the first
Very few
season.
people do. In
Yeah,
fact, I've been trolled online
I'm
simply
not
for
trolling
saying.
you.
No, I know you're not trolling. No, I was trolled online simply for saying that we should give Rings of Power a chance.
I
And
agree with you about the production values entirely and the casting. I think the problem in the first season, which they managed to correct to a certain extent in the second season, is that they had too many storylines which weren't connected. Um, so what happens if you do that in a screenplay is that you find it happens in multi-point of view, big fantasy series like Wheel of Time. People like certain storylines and not others. And so they lose contact with some parts of the world, and it's not clear where everybody is. So if you
hmm,
think about Lord of the Rings, you've got somebody sets off, other people join them, you get to know them, and then they split. It's a complicated interlaced structure, but it does have a thread. They were sort of trying to do that with Galadriel, but because her story doesn't connect to the stranger and the hobbits,
hmm,
and for a long, long, long time, it doesn't connect with Bronwyn and the sort of southern lands, that
yeah.
it feels as though it's falling apart. And the pacing was very strange in the first season because they suddenly make the rings in all of a sudden it's like here they are, it's Rings of Power and here are the elven rings. It was a very strange pacing, I felt. A lot of that I think was corrected in the second season, and I thought the kind of almost Shakespearean level of tension between Anatar and Celebrimbor
Hmm,
was
hmm.
wonderful. A sort of Othello Iago match up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I also, and getting some answers was also pleasing because, when if you withhold answers for too long, it's not fair on your watchers. So hopefully, I'm hoping that if the upward trajectory and learning the the way to hold a story together will improve so that your season three is even better. I'm
Yeah.
not worried about the liberties with the material so much because going back to our these are adaptations. Fine. Okay, right. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm watching it and semi enjoying it. So, I'm sort of
But
in the camp.
I,
Um,
I suppose I'm enjoying it from the point of view of trying to think of ways in which its sort of challenges are, you know, Tolkien up to this point. And by Tolkien up to this point, I mean Tolkien plus History of Middle Earth plus the Peter Jackson movies
mm.
plus Bakshi and everything. So I sort of just see it as more parts of this ever expanding jigsaw.
Last piece of the jigsaw is have you managed to catch up with War of the Rohirrim and do you have views?
Yeah, I've only seen it once. I went with my wife. We had a very short run where we live. I was back at Christmas, and I was in two minds, but I knew that I owed it, to my own sort of research interests, really, to go and see it, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I mean, I probably sound like an uncritical sort of like moviegoer, but we both really enjoyed it. Again, the female characters are very strong.
Mm.
Got no sense of humor. I think that's the big difference between the other both the Rings of Power and the Peter Jackson films, and also to an extent the BBC radio adaptation. What I really liked about it, it's just absolutely full of references to the other adaptations.
Mm.
Really stuff with references going back to Bakshi, to the Peter Jackson movies, and also to the Rings of Power as well. And that way of filmmakers making those references and those connections, I thought was really interesting. It's almost like it's not exactly like a patchwork. That gives the wrong impression. It's it's taking these motifs and using the motifs as part of the lexicon of making the film, I think. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was very effective. But I do need to see it again though, several
Yeah,
times.
I thought it was a really good stab at a story. I actually would like to see a live action version of it because
Hmm.
I think a lot
Hmm.
of the humor would come through with actors' performance, which
That's
doesn't,
interesting.
which
Yeah.
an anime doesn't. My problem with the film was the cartooning because anime doesn't cope well with horses, for example, the
Hmm.
movement of horses. So it just looked a bit strange. And the way that Hira would have a very white face all of a sudden in one frame, there was something strange about the colorization of it as well. So I like the story, but I would love to see it done with actors. So there you are, Peter Jackson.
Yeah. But
Next,
I
see
think
what
it's well.
Disney does. Do a live
True.
action version.
That's true. Yeah, real action like Lion King. But I
Yeah.
think it's also an attempt to appeal to, well, a market here in Southeast Asia,
Mm,
really, which has so much richer tradition of those anime films. So I think it's exploring different representations in that way.
yeah.
But I have learned more about anime films overall.
Well, thank you. That was a lot of material to cover in the last 100 years. So I'm going to put you on the spot. If you're going to a desert island and you can only take one adaptation with you, along with the novel, which one are you going to take?
Oh, what a difficult question. You didn't tell me you were going to ask
No,
that.
no, no. I sprung this one on you because I've been thinking about it.
It would be a toss-up between the BBC radio version and the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings. I think I would probably take the BBC radio version,
Think
because
that. Yeah.
um, I think that the characterization, it's such a strong cast, and they do such a good job. And as you sort of said earlier, the pictures are better when they're on the radio. So you do think about it in different ways. But it's not an easy choice.
There is one adaptation which you probably haven't had a chance to see, which is the musical. It was originally on at Drury Lane and kind of bombed or didn't do very well, but it's been revived recently by the Watermill Theatre in Newbury, which I had the
Hmm.
privilege of
Oh,
seeing.
you've seen it. Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, because it's near where I live, and it's brilliant. And it's a cheat to take a whole cast with you to a desert island because no longer is it desert. But what's so wonderful about that adaptation, and I hope they continue to do it in small venues
Hmm.
is because I think that's why it failed at Drury Lane, is it feels like this is the hobbits telling the story to future generations.
Right.
And it
Right.
starts with like a you as the audience become part of the party.
That
And
sounds
Bilbo
lovely.
comes round saying hello to you. And they've got music and dance and great actors playing. It's just really, really fun. Everyone plays musical instruments, carries musical instruments with them. But the choices in the second half, where they've got to compress everything, what they do is they make Rohan and Gondor one place.
Right.
And I
Right.
love the idea that the hobbits, those places down south, those places with kings, we're going to make them all one, and off they go. And the story just sort of embraces that, and it's got a really rural, delightful atmosphere to it. So, possibly that's my favorite adaptation of
That's very
all.
interesting. Yes,
Yeah,
I
but
do
that's
have.
only available to those who can get to see it. I think they're putting it on in Chicago, or it's gone to America, but I fear it's lost its rural roots once it goes back into a large theatre.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If yeah, I'll certainly go and see it if I get the chance. But I
Yeah,
don't
what
think.
I did tell you we were going to do is to finish off, is I always ask my guests where in all of the fantasy worlds you can go to Star Trek, Star Wars, Secrets of Nim. I don't mind. You can go anywhere. Um, where would you like to be in lockdown? Because you started your life in Macau in lockdown. What fantasy world would you like to go into lockdown?
Well, I've actually been thinking about this, and I, I'm afraid that you'll never have heard of the place I'm going to say.
No, it's exciting to hear a new place.
When I was, I mean, in the 1980s, so this is before, obviously before the internet. It's when, we played Dungeons and Dragons at school. It was very popular. And then I got into doing postal role-playing games. And there was a game run by somebody from Cornwall called Rob Knott. And he produced a fanzine called the Lankmar Star Daily, which is named after a Fritz Leiber land. And he set his role-playing game within the environs of the Lankmar Star Daily. And so basically, I remember one summer, um, you would sort of send pages and pages of what your character was going to do, and then you'd wait days or possibly weeks for Rob to respond with a long typewritten letter. And I found it completely immersive. I mean, it sounds very, very rudimentary compared with the computer games today, but it's because it was purely creative, purely imaginative, and it was really interacting with Rob running the game and also with other characters as well, because you could write to them. So it's very old-fashioned technology of letter writing, but it meant that you were trying to express yourself and communicate and really enter another world. So that's a world that I would like to be in if I was under lockdown. I should just add as a footnote, I wouldn't want to be in Middle Earth because it's too depressing. It's too dark and everything's collapsing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think what you have made me think of is actually one place which many people sort of went to. Um, it's like the world of Jumanji, so that you live digitally
right.
during
Yeah.
lockdown. So I was thinking actually that's not too bad because you can physically be with other people in a digital world, but whilst you are sort of stuck at home, but yet it has a reality. So maybe that would be not a bad place. And I think many people kind of did go into a sort of Jumanji existence. It's a
I think you're right. It'd be nice if we were to start writing letters again, even if we did have to disinfect them.
yes. Oh gosh, those were the days. Let's hope that never comes back. So Nick,
Yes.
thank you so much for spending so much time with us, and it's been fascinating.
It's
And
been
I
a
look
real pleasure.
forward to hearing yet more of your thoughts as I think we're going to hit a lot more Tolkien adaptations as the years pass, particularly as some of the works edge out of copyright. That's going to be an
Um,
interesting time.
I don't know.
2043.
I think the Tolkien estate will keep a strict
Life plus
control
70,
over that.
2043 is when it's going to hit.
Yeah, we'll see.
Not
We'll
the
see.
Silmarillion because that's Christopher
But
Tolkien. But
Well, they
we've
also
got
haven't sold the rights to the Silmarillion. I mean, it'll be interesting. I
yeah.
think that they're going to be quite carefully controlled. So I'm afraid it won't be in my lifetime.
Well, we've got C.S. Lewis going up copyright first. His
It'll be a test case, I think.
33,
Right,
2033.
a test case.
Yeah.
But we've got a lot to look forward to, and I think, as I sort of said before, that this is a nettle that we have to grasp. I think that it's really untenable to be a purist about Tolkien. We've got to see that there are different Tolkiens that are, whether we're just going to look at the book or whether we're going to accept the adaptations, but you can't separate them anymore, really. When you see Ian McKellen, you think of Gandalf. I wonder whether he does when he looks in the mirror. But also, it's difficult to forget those characters, those actors, when you're reading the book.
So, Nick, perhaps can I invite you back once we've had Hunt for Gollum, and we can have another chat?
Yeah,
that would be great fun. So, thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for joining us.
It's been lovely talking to you, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Mythmakers podcast, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. Visit oxfordcenterforfantasy.org to join in the fun. Find out about our online courses, in-person stays in Oxford, plus visit our shop for great gifts. Tell a friend and subscribe wherever you find your favourite podcasts worldwide.